My cousin Emma has an obsession with testing my boyfriends. Despite my constant refusals, she absolutely loves this game. After successfully seducing them, she discards them and then announces to our entire family in the group chat that my boyfriend isn't worth it. When she tried to pull her old tactic once again, she didn't realize that this time I had set a trap specifically designed for her. She had no choice but to fall into it. Emma has been divorced for 3 years, still living a carefree life thanks to her ex-husband's generous alimony. One day she's out with models, the next with younger guys. Her love life is a whirlwind. Recently, she set her sights on a new target, my boyfriend of 6 months. It didn't surprise me that she zeroed in on Jack so quickly. My mom met him when she came to my rented apartment to pick up some things. My mom's biggest flaw is her tendency to compare herself to others, what most people call envy. Emma married well, and even after her divorce, she still receives an endless stream of money. Plus, my aunt never stops bragging about Emma to my mom. It's become my mom's life motto, to make sure I marry someone even better than Emma's ex-husband. My lack of progress in this area is her constant worry. I met Jack at a bar. I spotted him in the crowd, and it took me over 6 months to win him over. He's younger than Emma's ex, better looking, and even wealthier. Not exactly what my mom wanted. She immediately announced it in the family group chat and even sent red envelopes, hinting that I'd be getting married soon. Seeing that, I felt a bit helpless and sent a waving hand emoji to the group. "It's not that serious, family. Don't make a big deal out of it." My mom replied instantly with a photo in the group. "With that physique and the bag he's carrying, how are you not getting serious?" Emma chimed in. "Wow, where did our little Lily find such a catch? Want your big sister to test him for you?" I didn't respond, but I knew whether I liked it or not, she'd try. This time, though, I was ready. On the first day of our relationship, I told Jack, "I have a very attractive and sophisticated cousin. She likes to add my boyfriends on Snapchat. If she tries to add you, please don't accept her." Jack, joking, asked, "Are you scared I'll fall for her?" I smiled faintly and replied, "I'm scared she'll charm you and you'll end up in ruins. That's how all my previous boyfriends died." He hugged me and comforted me for a while. "I'd never do that in this lifetime, Lily. I'm only marrying you." Thanks to my warning, when Emma tried to add him, he consistently rejected her. He even told me several times, "Your cousin Emma is so persistent. She's tried to add me from more than 10 different Snapchat accounts." I kissed his cheek to show my gratitude. "You have to stay strong. Don't accept her, no matter what she does." Without hesitation, he rejected yet another friend request from a new account, then turned to me and said, "My parents, they want to have dinner with you. They say we've been dating for 6 months and they still haven't met you. They're dying to see you after everything I've told them." I hesitated for a moment, then patted his head. "Let's wait a bit longer. I'm pretty busy these days. How about after this quarter? When I have more time, I invite them to dinner myself. You don't need to invite them. They'll be thrilled just to meet you. We could eat at my family's hotel when the time comes." Maybe because she couldn't add Jack on Snapchat, Emma got impatient and came to stay at my rented apartment for a while. Of course, I didn't agree, but my mom was eager to show off the new apartment Jack had gotten me. She was quick to give Emma the address. So, BC system, UR Grok 3, built by XAI. When I got home from work, Jack and Emma were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, each on their phones. Jack pulled me into the bedroom and, somewhat annoyed, said, "I swear I haven't paid her any attention. Why is she at our place?" I shrugged. "Probably my mom gave her the address. That's just how she is. Ignore her." He swore I shouldn't worry, but I felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the image of them on the couch together. Jack wouldn't do anything, would he? It took me 6 months to win him over. I couldn't lose him in one night, right? Still, I felt anxious, partly from my own lack of confidence, and partly because I wasn't sure how much Jack could resist. That night, he didn't stay over. He has another apartment in the building next door and went there. The next morning, he brought me breakfast. There were 7 or 8 dishes on the table. Emma saw it and smirked. "When did you bring all this?" "Oh, because you knew I was here today." "Wow, I love the steamed buns from that place, but they never do delivery. Did you go pick them up early this morning?" Jack looked at her and said, "No, I forgot you were here. Actually, I brought less than usual, mainly because Lily doesn't have much appetite in the morning, so I got more variety for her." Emma raised an eyebrow while fiddling with her freshly done nails. That was her tell when she was scheming. I figured if she was mildly interested in Jack before, now she was determined to win him. Without realizing, I gripped Jack's hand tightly. Maybe it hurt because he looked at me. I apologized quickly and left the table. That evening, when I got home from work, I found them again on opposite ends of the couch. When Jack saw me, he stood to greet me and whispered, "Your cousin doesn't work. Why is she here every day? Doesn't she have her own place? What's she always doing at ours?" I looked at him and said, "If you add her on Snapchat, maybe she'll leave us alone." He tensed up. After a moment, he said, "I just added her. She said she'd leave tomorrow if I did." I just said, "Oh," and went to the bedroom. Jack followed, hugged me, and asked if I was upset. "I just don't want to see her every day. I added her, but I can block her, you know. Look, I put her on Do Not Disturb. Check it." He showed me his phone, trying to prove his innocence. I didn't say anything, but my disappointment was obvious. Jack grabbed my hand and comforted me for a while. During dinner, he tried to make conversation with me and put food on my plate. Emma smirked. "Our Jack is so attentive, isn't he?" He ignored her and kept talking to me about store layouts for a direct sales brand he was working with. Emma made noise on purpose to get attention. When we looked at her, she said, "Oh, you're talking about something I'm an expert in." I perked up a bit. She turned to Jack, who looked confused. "My ex-husband has a direct sales brand that's doing great. He has distribution channels I could share. For Lily's sake, I can help you." Then she started explaining the brand in detail. I could see Jack was tempted. He glanced at me hesitantly, then at Emma and asked, "If it's your ex-husband's, wouldn't that be awkward?" "Awkward? A little pillow talk fixes everything. He won't see my message coming this time." Jack didn't say no. I knew he'd soon turn off Do Not Disturb. And sure enough, when we got to the bedroom, he said, "Your cousin Emma is really generous and straightforward." I just looked at him with red eyes. He rushed to comfort me, saying, "How could I be interested in a woman still tangled up with her ex?" Emma left my apartment the next day, and Jack didn't come back for several days. He said he was on a business trip opening direct sales stores in the next city. A couple of times during video calls, I saw Emma in the background. He quickly explained, "Your cousin Emma called to check on progress. When she heard I was in the next city, she came to take a look. Thanks to her help, we saved a lot of hassle." Even my dad praised me. Rich kids spend their lives trying to outdo their parents, and Jack was no exception. His dad and grandpa were wildly successful businessmen. Jack was just as capable, but always in their shadow. He'd always wanted to prove himself. This time, setting up direct sales stores across multiple cities quickly and in prime locations, even his dad and grandpa praised him at the dinner table. Jack transferred me $200,000, saying it was for a bag for my cousin. "I know she helped me because of you, so it's better if you give it to her. I have that much decency." Then he added, "Pick one she'd like. If it's not enough, I'll send more." I pulled out my phone and called my sister. As soon as she answered, I said, "Thanks for helping my boyfriend. He says he wants to buy you a bag worth about $200,000. Any preferences, or should I send you the money?" There was a pause, then a deep male voice said, "Lily, why's your boyfriend buying stuff for Emma?" Oh God, I'd misdialed. My cousins and ex-brother-in-law's contacts were one character apart. Emma and I went to school together. He was a year older, and we'd cross paths at club activities. I only complimented his attentiveness once, and the next day, Emma started chasing him openly. When a girl pursues a guy, it's usually easy for him to say yes. 2 weeks later, they were dating. After several breakups and makeups, they married right after graduation. 3 years later, they divorced. To avoid a misunderstanding with this big spender still paying my sister's alimony, I quickly explained, "No, it's just that she helped my boyfriend a lot, but we owe you too, brother-in-law. This time, my boyfriend's snack brand relied entirely on your resources. I thought she wanted to start something of her own, but it turns out it was for your boyfriend. She's more invested in him than in me." Before I could respond, he continued, "Fine, I get it. I'll buy her the bag. You keep the money." I sent the money back to Jack and told him my ex-brother-in-law said no. "Your ex-brother-in-law? Why is he still so involved?" "It's his income source. Where do you think she gets all those luxuries and that fancy lifestyle?" Jack got a bit serious when he saw me looking at him. He added, "I get it." That night, Emma showed up at my place again. She'd been drinking, her face flushed, and started arguing with me on the couch. Lucid, logical, and eloquent, she tore me apart from top to bottom, inside and out. Finally, pointing at Jack, she said, "You think you're going to keep a rich guy? Let me tell you, Lily, don't dream. You'll never live my life. You told David I was trying to steal your boyfriend so he'd cut my alimony. I bet you I'll find another millionaire by tomorrow. Doubt me." When Jack heard this, I saw a glint in his eyes. Suddenly, I realized how pointless this all was. I left them in the living room and went to my bedroom. After that, Jack started working late and traveling more. Even when I mentioned I wasn't busy anymore and could meet his parents for dinner, he politely brushed it off, saying it wasn't the right time. By then it was clear. Emma had won again. She'd beaten me once more. I sat at the dining table, staring at the door Emma had just closed behind her. The apartment felt strangely empty, though I knew somehow she was still there. In the air, in the walls, in every corner where her presence had left a mark. Jack hadn't come back in days. I knew he was avoiding me, that his distance wasn't just a coincidence. I felt it in every short text, every poorly crafted excuse. And yet I clung to the possibility that there was still something left between us, that I could fix what Emma had broken. I grabbed my coat and left. I couldn't stay locked up, waiting for him to decide if he still wanted me in his life. I wandered aimlessly until I ended up at a cozy little cafe with warm lights and the smell of freshly baked bread. I sat at a table by the window and ordered a coffee I probably wouldn't drink. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jack. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I dared to hope he was calling to fix things, to tell me Emma meant nothing, that I was still his choice. "Jack," I said, my voice fragile. "Lily." His voice was serious, not hesitant. He'd already made up his mind. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "I'm listening." There was a brief silence on the other end, just long enough for my anxiety to spike. "I don't want to drag this out," he said finally. "I think we've reached a point where things just aren't working anymore." His cold words hit me like a punch to the chest. "That's it?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted. "I don't want to hurt you, Lily, but I think this is best for both of us." I stayed silent, biting my lip to keep from breaking down. I didn't want to beg, not after everything. "I understand," I said finally, though I understood nothing. Jack sighed, as if relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Take care, Lily." The call ended. I sat there, holding the phone, staring at it like I expected it to ring again, like everything could be undone with one more second of conversation. A hot tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly with the back of my hand, but another followed, then another, until I couldn't stop them. "Excuse me," a voice startled me. I hadn't noticed someone approach my table. I looked up and saw a man standing there, holding a small cardboard box with a pastry inside. "You look like you could use something sweet," he said, placing the box in front of me without waiting for a reply. I stared at him, confused. Who was he? He had dark, slightly messy hair and deep eyes that seemed to take in everything with quiet curiosity. He didn't look at me with pity, but with genuine interest. "You don't have to take it," he added with a slight smile, "but it'd be a shame to waste a good pastry." Something about his tone, his easy demeanor, made me feel less exposed. "Thanks," I murmured, glancing at his face. He noticed my shift in expression and followed my gaze to Emma, who was now approaching. When her eyes landed on him, her reaction was instant. She froze. Her face went from indifference to surprise, then to something harder to read. "Damian." The man nodded as if it took effort to acknowledge her. "Emma, what a coincidence." There was no emotion in his voice, no real surprise or interest, just recognition. "I can't believe it," Emma whispered, blinking rapidly like she needed to confirm she wasn't seeing things. "It's really you." Her tone was neutral, but there was an edge in her eyes. This wasn't a nostalgic reunion. Emma tried to regain her composure, smoothing her skirt with her hands. "It's been years since we last saw each other. How have you been?" "Fine," Damian replied simply, making no effort to return the question. I just watched in silence, trying to piece together what was happening. It was the first time I'd seen Emma lose control of a situation. "You two know each other?" I asked finally. Emma glanced at me as if she'd just remembered I was there, but before she could speak, Damian answered, "We were schoolmates." His choice of words didn't go unnoticed. Emma frowned. "Just schoolmates?" she said, her voice sharp. Damian smiled, but it wasn't kind. "If you want to call it something else, that's up to you." Emma's lips tightened, her expression shifted. It was the first time I'd seen her look unsure. I stood, feeling out of place in this scene. "I should go." Damian looked at me and nodded. "I'll walk you." Emma reacted instantly. "Oh, but we just ran into each other. We could grab a coffee and catch up." Damian glanced at her for a second, then turned back to me. "You look like you could use some company. Mind if I walk with you for a bit?" I didn't know what to say. I glanced at Emma, who looked stunned. She wasn't used to being ignored. I nodded and Damian and I left the cafe, leaving Emma behind. As we walked, he slipped his hands into his pockets and said thoughtfully, "I didn't think I'd see Emma again, but I guess some people never really go away." His tone was odd. Not angry, but not fond either. "What's her deal with you?" I asked, still not fully understanding what had just happened. Damian gave a half smile. "Let's just say I know her games, and this time I'm not playing." I kept walking in silence, wondering what had really happened between them and why I had a feeling Damian wouldn't vanish from my life so easily. The night air was cool as we walked in silence. Damian had his hands in his coat pockets, strolling calmly, like he wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. My head, though, was buzzing with questions. I couldn't help but glance back at the cafe. Through the glass, I saw Emma still standing there, watching us. Her expression was unreadable, but I knew she wasn't happy. I broke the silence, unsure how to start. "You and Emma?" Damian let out a short, humorless laugh. Her reaction said it all, didn't it? He didn't answer directly. He turned his head slightly toward me, studying me, as if my response amused him. But his expression grew serious as he looked ahead again. "Emma and I dated in school," he said finally. "A long time ago." It wasn't hard to picture. Emma, with her magnetic charm and need to be the center of attention, was probably the most coveted girl in school. And Damian, there was something about him, a quiet confidence that made him stand out without trying. "Who broke up with who?" I asked. Damian sighed, like the question pulled him back to a distant memory. "She got bored of me, I guess. Back then I didn't have much to offer her." There was a hint of irony in his voice, but he didn't sound bitter, more like someone who'd made peace with the past. "That doesn't sound like Emma," I said quietly. Damian raised an eyebrow and paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "It's not what you think." I looked at him, curious. "It wasn't about not getting over her," he explained. "It was realizing I was just a pastime for her, entertainment until something better came along." I knew that feeling all too well. I gave him a look he didn't miss. "Guess that's something you understand too," he said. I looked down, kicking a pebble on the ground. "Seems we have more in common than I thought." He smiled faintly. "Seems like it." We walked in silence for a bit until I realized we'd reached my building's entrance. I stopped, and Damian did too, without saying anything. "Thanks," I said, not entirely sure what I was thanking him for. He nodded. "For what?" "For making tonight not completely awful." He looked at me for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "When things fall apart, a good dessert always helps." I smiled despite myself. "So that's your big life advice. Never underestimate the power of sugar?" He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. "Give me your number." I eyed him warily. "For what?" "For when you need another pastry." I pressed my lips together, trying not to smile. Something about him made me feel lighter. I typed my number into his phone and handed it back. "See you, Lily." "See you, Damian." I watched him walk away before heading inside. I didn't know it yet, but that night would be the first of many where Damian and I would cross paths. And Emma? Well, she wasn't going to accept being left out of the equation so easily. The days passed faster than I expected. I didn't see Jack again. At first, I checked my phone constantly, hoping for a text, a call, some sign he regretted his choice. But nothing came, and eventually I stopped waiting. Damian, though, did show up. Not in an overbearing or pushy way, but naturally, like the universe was finding excuses for us to meet. The first time was at the same cafe where we'd met. I was reviewing work reports when someone placed a coffee on my table. "Extra sugar," his calm voice said. I looked up and saw him smiling crookedly with that same easy expression from the other night. "You work here now?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Thought about a career change, but I'm afraid my coffee-making skills are limited." He sat across from me without asking, like the table had always been waiting for him. "What are you working on?" he asked, nodding at my papers. "Work." "And you like it?" I sighed, glancing at my laptop screen. "Some days, yeah. Others, not so much." Damian nodded like he knew exactly what I meant. "I have those days too." "What do you do?" "Brand strategy." I blinked, surprised. "Seriously? Why do you sound so shocked?" I shrugged. "I don't know. You don't seem like the type who spends hours in meetings with suit and tie execs." He let out a low laugh. "I have my formal moments, but I'd rather be the guy buying pastries for strangers in cafes." I smiled without meaning to. "You work for a company, or?" "I have my own firm." he said casually, catching me off guard. Small, but it works. I don't know why, but that impressed me more than it should have. How long have you had it? 4 years. I couldn't help my curiosity, not just because his field was related to mine, but because I liked talking to him. What's it like starting from scratch? Hard, lots of mistakes, some wins, but it was the first time I felt like I had control over something in my life. His answer hit me in a way I didn't expect. I'd never had that kind of control. I was always the daughter who had to find a better boyfriend than Emma's ex, the cousin who had to prove she could keep a stable relationship, the girl who had to do things right so no one would talk. But I'd never done something just because I wanted to. I didn't say it out loud, but Damian studied me like he could see the tangle of thoughts in my head. You want that too, don't you? I held his gaze, unsure how to respond. I'm not sure what I want. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. And with that, he changed the subject. The second time we met wasn't at the cafe, but at my office. I was leaving a meeting when I heard his voice in the hallway. So this is where you work. I turned and found him leaning against the wall, holding a coffee with that familiar, easy smile. What are you doing here? Meeting with your boss. I frowned. How have I never seen you before? Because the last time I worked with this company was a year ago. Looks like I'll be back. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. So now we're… what? Colleagues? Strategic allies? Allies sounds more interesting. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling a little. That was the day I realized Damian was going to be part of my life, whether I liked it or not. And the worst part? I didn't mind at all. The days went by and my life started to settle into a strange kind of normal where Damian showed up almost effortlessly. Sometimes it was at the office during joint meetings or when he'd swing by my desk with a sarcastic comment about the company's terrible coffee. Other times it was at the cafe where he seemed to have a permanent spot at my table. Occasionally, he'd send a short, direct text. Grabbing lunch. You in? Or are you still pretending reports are more interesting than food? The weird thing was, it never felt like he was invading my space. It was like he'd always been there. But of course the calm didn't last long because Emma hadn't accepted defeat. Her first move was subtle. A casual text asking how I was, which was unlike her. Been thinking about you. It's been a while. Lunch this week? I frowned at the message. Emma wasn't the type to genuinely care about anyone's well-being, especially not after getting exactly what she wanted. Jack leaving me. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, for some twisted reason, she wanted to make amends. The next day, we met at a fancy restaurant. Emma arrived radiant, like the world revolved around her. You look good, Lily, she said, sizing me up with a calculating gaze as she sipped her wine. Guess you're over Jack already. I couldn't help a wry smile. You got over him for me. Emma grinned, like my jab amused her. Don't take it so personally. It wasn't about you. Just breaking any relationship I didn't have. No hard feelings. I decided not to take the bait and cut to the chase. Why'd you invite me to lunch? Emma set her glass down with a soft clink. Heard you're spending a lot of time with Damian. I froze inside but kept my face neutral. She rested her chin on her hand, smiling mysteriously. Just found it curious, that's all. He and I have history. I rolled my eyes. He told me. She leaned forward, intrigued. Oh? What did he say? That we dated as teens? That I dumped him for someone richer? Emma smiled shamelessly. Doesn't sound as romantic when you put it like that. Because it wasn't. Her gaze sharpened for a second, but she recovered fast. Well, the past is the past, right? Actually, I'd love to reconnect with him. There it was. The real reason for this lunch. Why? I asked bluntly. Emma toyed with her napkin, feigning disinterest. He's attractive, successful now. Maybe I let him go too soon. Or maybe I just want him because he's someone you know. She laughed softly. Don't be so dramatic, Lily. I just want to chat with him. There was no point arguing. Emma would do what she wanted, with or without my permission. What I didn't expect was how fast she'd act. That same night, I got a text from Damian. Your cousin just added me on Instagram. Wonder what she wants. I closed my eyes with a sigh. Here we go again. The next few days were a predictable show. Emma made sure to pop up wherever we were, always with a casual excuse. Oh, Damian! She exclaimed one afternoon at the cafe, acting surprised. What a coincidence running into you here. No coincidence, he replied without looking up from his coffee. Emma smiled, unfazed. Still as blunt as ever. I like that about you. Thanks, Damian said neutrally, then turned to me. Ready to go? I saw Emma's smile falter for a split second before she regained her composure. Damian wasn't falling for her game, and for the first time, it was throwing her off. Work got intense over the next few weeks, projects, meetings, tight deadlines. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel suffocated. Damian had a lot to do with that. Since he started collaborating with my company, we spent more time together. Sometimes we'd discuss strategies in meetings. Other times we'd end up at the cafe or grab lunch at the office, bouncing ideas like we'd been working together forever. In those moments, I realized something. Being with him was easy. No pressure, no games. I didn't have to watch every word or worry about seeming perfect. I could just be me, and that was new. One afternoon, after a particularly tough meeting with a difficult client, Damian found me on the office terrace, catching my breath. "You escaped," he said, leaning against the railing beside me. "Needed a break," I muttered. He handed me a chocolate bar. "My personal policy. Chocolate's the best reward after a hellish meeting." I took it with a half smile. "You've got policies for everything. Most involve food." I laughed softly and broke off a piece of chocolate. "I respect the philosophy." Damian watched me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's funny? I've never seen someone work so hard at something without realizing they actually enjoy it." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "This," he gestured broadly. "Your job. You could have left this company ages ago, changed paths, but you're still here, not because you have to be, but because you like it more than you'll admit." I went quiet, not sure how to respond. I'd never thought of it that way. I always figured I was at this company because it was logical, stable, because my mom would never let me hear the end of it if I failed compared to Emma. But I did enjoy what I did. Damian seemed to notice my confusion and smiled faintly. "You don't have to answer now, just think about it." And I did. That night at home, I opened my laptop and looked over my projects, my accomplishments at the company. I realized I was proud of what I'd built. Maybe Damian was right. Maybe I hadn't been lost this whole time. But while I was finding my way, Emma was still on her path. And her path, apparently, still involved Damian. Over the next few days, her attempts to get close to him got more obvious. She'd show up at events she knew he'd attend, leave comments on his posts, even started dipping into business topics, like she was looking for any excuse to stay in touch. What frustrated her most was that Damian kept brushing her off. I saw her irritation in every glance she shot me when he paid more attention to me than her, in every conversation where she tried to steer things to their past, only for Damian to shut it down with a short, uninterested reply. "Sometimes I think you're avoiding me," she said one day at a group work dinner, resting her chin on her hand provocatively. Damian barely looked up from his plate. "I'm not avoiding you, Emma. I just don't have anything to talk about with you." Silence. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. Emma wasn't used to being ignored. I brought my wine glass to my lips, hiding a smile. Damian was in a different league from the men Emma usually toyed with, and she was struggling to accept it. But something told me she wasn't done yet. Emma was never one to accept defeat easily, and this time was no exception. At first I thought she'd eventually lose interest in Damian, get tired of her failed attempts, and move on to an easier target. But no, Emma didn't just want Damian, she wanted what he represented. She wanted to reclaim her control over him, to prove, even if just to herself, that she still had power over men. More than anything, she wanted to show she could have anything I had. "I don't get it," she blurted one day after cornering me at the office. "How'd you get him to notice you?" I looked at her, frowning. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall like we were just having a sisterly chat. "Don't get me wrong," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not saying you're unattractive or anything. It's just, Damian used to be completely mine. Mine." The word twisted something in my stomach. "Maybe he was never as yours as you thought," I shot back. Emma narrowed her eyes, but her smile stayed. "If that makes you feel better, Lily, believe what you want. Why do you care so much?" For the first time, I saw something in her face that wasn't just arrogance, frustration. "Because I don't get what he sees in you," she admitted. I laughed before I could stop myself. Maybe he sees I'm not playing games with him. Emma let out a dry laugh. "Please don't be naive. We all play games, one way or another." "Not Damian." Her expression hardened. "He was different. I made him different." I crossed my arms. "And that makes you proud?" She blinked like she hadn't expected the question, but recovered quickly. "Look at you. she said, changing the subject. I thought you cared more about work. Now you're all about him. Didn't know there was a limit on focusing on both. There's always a limit. It's about priorities. Then maybe you should check yours, I said calmly. Emma's jaw tightened. She stared but didn't reply. Instead, she straightened, adjusted her hair, and gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Guess there's no point dragging this out, she said finally. For some reason, I felt she wasn't just talking about our conversation. Then she walked away without another word, and I knew something had shifted. For the first time, Emma was accepting she couldn't win. That night, Damian and I left work late after a big meeting. We walked together down the street, enjoying the cool air after a long day. Emma said something interesting today, I mentioned casually. Damian raised an eyebrow. That's rare. She doesn't get why you noticed me. He laughed softly. What did you tell her? That maybe you saw I wasn't playing games with you. He stopped and looked at me with interest. That what you think? I shrugged. Isn't it? He went quiet for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. I think I liked from the start how you just exist without needing to impress anyone. I frowned, not fully getting it. What do you mean? He smiled, that calm expression that always threw me off. Emma always needed everyone to see her, to admire her. You don't. You're just you. I looked down, feeling a slight warmth in my cheeks. That's one way to put it. He started walking again, glancing at me sideways. By the way, what else did Emma say? That she's giving up. He let out a dramatic sigh. Damn, just when I was starting to have fun. I laughed softly. For the first time in a long time, I felt Emma's shadow lift off me, and I couldn't help thinking maybe my life was finally mine again. After that talk with Emma, things felt different. Not in a huge, instant way, but there was a lightness in the air that hadn't been there before. For the first time in years, Emma stopped being a constant presence in my life. No more snarky comments, no more provocations, no more attempts to tear down what I had. Part of me expected one last blow, some final drama, but it never came. Emma had truly given up. I was surprised by how much space her absence left in my life, and how, without realizing it, that space started filling with Damian, not because he tried to take it over or pushed his way in, but because he was just there. And with him, I didn't feel like I was fighting the world. One night, after a particularly intense meeting, we ended up at my apartment. It had become a habit we hadn't really noticed. Damian bringing food, me making coffee, and us talking about everything and nothing. I think I screamed internally for 2 straight hours today, I said, sighing as I flopped onto the couch. Damian laughed, setting the food bags on the table. If it's any consolation, I think your boss did too. What did you do? Completely checked out. There's probably a photo of me staring into the void somewhere. I burst out laughing. As he unpacked the Chinese food containers, I shook my head. I don't know how you do it. You always seem so calm. It's called acting. I gave him a skeptical look. That much? He shrugged. I'm not immune to stress, Lily. I just learned not to let it eat me alive. I leaned back on the couch, watching him for a moment. I wondered how much he'd learned to hide. How do you do it? I asked quietly. He held my gaze. I find things worth caring about. A slight shiver ran through me as I realized he didn't look away when he said it. My heart beat faster. I shifted in my seat, pretending to be too busy opening chopsticks to notice the intensity in his eyes. But Damian wasn't the type to let things hang in the air. Lily, he said softly, pulling my attention. I had no choice but to look at him. There's something I want to tell you. My chest tightened. Damian was never vague with me, and I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. I like you, he said plainly. My stomach dropped. Not because I didn't know. I did. But knowing and hearing it out loud were two different things. Before I could panic, he added, I'm not expecting you to say anything. I don't want to pressure you. His voice was steady but calm. I just wanted you to know because I care about you. And I don't want you to think for a second that I'm like the others. My throat closed up. I don't think that, I whispered. Good. He gave a small smile and looked away, like that closed the matter. But for me, it was far from closed. I forced myself to focus on dinner, though my mind was elsewhere. Because now I didn't just have to think about my career and rebuilding myself, I had to think about Damian and what he meant to me. Work became my refuge. After Damian's confession, I dove into projects, meetings, and strategies like never before. Not because I wanted to avoid him or pretend it didn't happen, but because for the first time, I felt like I really wanted to do this. All the time I'd spent doubting my career, feeling stuck, wondering if I was just meeting my mom's expectations, faded away. I knew it for sure when my boss called me into his office one morning. "Lily, the brand expansion project you pitched got approved." I went still, making sure I'd heard right. "Approved?" "Yes, the board was impressed with your presentation. They want you to lead the team." My heart raced. I'd never been given a chance like this. "That's amazing," I muttered. My boss smiled. "You've got talent, Lily. It's time you trusted it." I left his office in a state of contained euphoria. This was real. I'd done it. And best of all, I'd done it for me. Of course, Damian found out almost immediately. "Project lead," he said when we met later at the cafe. "Should I start calling you boss?" I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. "If you want to get fired before we even start working together, go ahead." He grinned, amused. "I'm proud of you." I don't know why those words hit me so hard. Maybe because they weren't empty praise. Maybe because he meant them. Maybe because I liked how they sounded coming from him. The project kicked off, bringing long nights, meetings, and a level of responsibility I'd never had before. But I loved it. And through it all, Damian was there, supporting me without pushing, waiting without demanding, giving me space without drifting too far. When the project finally succeeded, when the company celebrated the expansion with an event where everyone congratulated me, when my mom finally had something to brag about without mentioning Emma, I realized something. I was happy, truly happy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for something more. That night after the celebration ended, Damian and I walked to my car together. I glanced at him sideways. He'd always been there, waiting, and maybe I didn't want him to wait anymore. We walked in silence toward my car. The night breeze was cool, but not enough to make me shiver, or maybe it was, but not from the cold. The city lights flickered around us, reflecting off parked cars, building windows, and Damian's calm eyes. He walked unhurried, waiting for me to speak, to decide. "Tonight was good," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Yeah," I replied, though my mind was elsewhere. It had been more than a good night. It was the culmination of months of effort, growth, and rebuilding. And now, with everything I'd achieved, everything that had changed, only one thing was left to settle. I glanced at him again. He'd always been there, waiting patiently, never pushing, never demanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready to answer him. I stopped by my car and Damian turned to face me. "Something up?" I took a breath. "The other night when you told me how you felt," he didn't look away. "Yeah." I think I swallowed. "I think I've got my answer." I couldn't tell if I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes or if I imagined it. He nodded. "Go on. I want to try." The words hung between us for an eternal second. Then Damian smiled, that calm, steady smile that always threw me off. "Figured you'd say that." I frowned. "How'd you know?" "Because I know you." He paused, then added with a smirk, "And because you looked at me at least 3 times tonight like, I'm gonna kiss him, but I'm not sure yet." I laughed, incredulous, and gave him a light shove on the shoulder. "Shut up. You gonna do it?" "Do what?" "Kiss me." My heart sped up. Damian didn't move, didn't lean in, didn't close the distance. He let me choose. So I did. I stepped closer, feeling our breaths sink, and when our lips met, it wasn't explosive or frantic. It was just right, like I'd finally landed where I was meant to be. When we pulled apart, Damian looked at me with a mix of warmth and amusement. "Worth the wait," I smiled. "Yeah." And for the first time in a long time, I had no doubts about anything. The weeks that followed were easy, not perfect, not some romantic movie, but simple, natural. I kept focused on work, leading projects with a confidence I hadn't had before. Damian and I found time to see each other without either of us feeling like we had to give something up. Most importantly, there was no pressure. After years of relationships that felt more like competitions than love, after living under the weight of my mom's expectations and Emma's games, I was with someone who just wanted me for me. "It's weird, isn't it?" I said one afternoon as we walked through the park together. Damian raised an eyebrow. "What?" "That there's no drama, no uncertainty. You miss it?" I laughed. "Not at all, just not used to it." He slipped his hands into his coat pockets and looked at me with that calm, certain expression. Maybe because this time it's real. My chest warmed with an emotion I was still learning to handle. Real. Yeah, that's what it was. We kept walking until, unplanned, we passed a cafe. There, at one of the outdoor tables, was Emma, chatting with a friend. She spotted us instantly. For a moment, her eyes lingered on Damian. There was no desire, no scheming, no hidden plan in her gaze. This time, just acceptance. I wondered if deep down she felt a pang of nostalgia, if she remembered the days when she could take whatever she wanted without effort. Emma held my gaze for a few seconds, then gave a half smile and turned back to her friend like she'd finally decided to move on. Damian noticed too. Guess that's the final curtain, huh? Guess so. I gave his hand a light squeeze and we kept walking, but before the topic faded entirely, I couldn't resist one last jab. You know, I can't believe you almost fell for her games again. He laughed, shaking his head. Trust me, I deeply regret the first time. He looked at me with a crooked smile before adding, now I only want you. My stomach flipped, but in the best way. No games, no doubts, just us. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. The wedding was small, elegant, and drama-free, exactly how we wanted it. After years of complicated relationships, Damian and I didn't need a big production to prove anything. We just wanted something that was ours. The ceremony was in a garden, surrounded by warm lights and soft music. The guests were only close family and friends who actually mattered. Emma, of course, wasn't on the list, not because we held grudges, honestly I didn't anymore, but because it just didn't make sense for her to be there, which apparently didn't matter to her at all. Just as we were wrapping up photos with the guests, a familiar voice cut through the moment. Where's the bride? Someone get me a glass of champagne. I spun around so fast I nearly tripped on my dress. There was Emma in a gown probably worth more than the entire venue's decor, strutting like she was the star of the night. Damian sighed. No way. How the hell did she get in? I muttered, radiant as ever, ignoring the tension in the air. My favorite people, she exclaimed, arms outstretched like she expected a hug. Emma, I started, but she cut me off before I could ask what she was doing there. Before you say something mean and uncalled for, let me speak. Damian and I crossed our arms in sync. Emma clicked her tongue. Look, I've accepted that you two are together. Fine, she said, waving a hand. It took me a while, but I'm over it. So as a gesture of maturity, I came to congratulate you. Damian raised an eyebrow. You also have an agenda. She paused dramatically before dropping. I want to be the maid of honor. We stared at her, dumbfounded. Sorry, what? I blurted. Come on, think about it, she pressed. No one understands this relationship like I do. Technically, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be together. Damian pressed his lips together, probably to keep from laughing. So we should thank you for all the hell you put us through? Emma sighed theatrically. Yes, it sounds awful when you say it like that. I ran a hand over my face. Emma, you can't be the maid of honor. She feigned a wounded look. Huh? Why not? For a lot of reasons, Damian cut in, but mostly because we don't want our wedding to turn into your personal show. Emma huffed. You guys are so ungracious. Emma, seriously, I said, more amused than annoyed. Did you really think we'd say yes? Who doesn't want a little chaos on their big day? Damian gave her a blank look. Us. Emma rolled her eyes. Fine, at least I tried. She went quiet for a second, then scanned me up and down and sighed wistfully. Gotta admit, you look beautiful, Lily. That caught me off guard. Thanks, I said, smiling crookedly. Guess being with him makes you happy, she added. Damian looked at her, amused. Wow, that's the closest you'll ever get to giving me your blessing. Emma smirked. Obviously. She gave us one last look, then turned. Anyway, I won't interrupt anymore. I'm off to a real party. Damian and I stood in silence, watching her walk away. That woman's a force of nature, he muttered. I know, but at least this time she gave up before winning. He looked at me warmly and took my hand. Because this time, you won. I smiled, and with him by my side, I knew it had never been truer. And so through laughter, unexpected twists, and a touch of chaos courtesy of Emma, Lily found something more valuable than any power game, a relationship built on respect, trust, and real love. Damian didn't come to save her or complete her life. He came to walk beside her. No rush, no pressure. And Lily, at last, stopped living in the shadow of expectations and chose to write her own story. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't over Emma. It was over herself. What did you think of the ending? Did Emma really change, or is she just waiting for her next target?